Hi guys, welcome to our YouTube channel AlgoWise. So basically AlgoWise is a stock market education platform. Here we'll be creating a series of videos, mainly covering basics of stock market, and then we'll go into detail like stock specific analysis and everything in later part of the series. So today we have Mr. Pratik, who is an ex-trader and a banker, and he's quite well versed with the terms of the market, and then he follows world market very closely. So I think he would be the best person to give a detailed analysis of what he feels the basics are and the way how it will be. So he'll be explaining it to us now. So let's give it to Pratik. Hi Pratik, welcome.
Hi, Kalyan. Thank you for inviting me to your channel. So, because you want to know about the basics of macroeconomics, I'm going to talk about the very basics. For example, the GDP. What is GDP, right? So let's start with what is the GDP. GDP is nothing but the gross domestic product of a country, right? Which is sort of, suppose you are spending some amount, you are spending money, that money is going as an income to somebody, right? So for the GDP calculation, what happens is that it is basically equal to the spending that all the consumers are doing or all the businesses are doing, and that is also equal to the income that people are getting in a country, right? So GDP of a country can actually be defined from the spending side as well as from the other side, which is the income side, right? On top of that, you might ask me that, okay, there are some exports that we do, there are some imports that we do, right? So that also gets added to the GDP. Exports minus import, whatever is the net value of that, that will get added to the GDP that we have, right? So that is how we sort of can visualize GDP. But let me share my screen with you, and I will show you, how GDP kind of looks like from a theoretical standpoint, right? So if you look at this picture, it will give you some sort of understanding. For the first component is the personal consumption and expenditure. Then we have got the business investment. Then we have government spending, because government is also one component of the GDP. It kind of spends money. And there is net export of goods and services that I explained, exports minus import, right? Consumption expenditure is very simple. Like you are buying something, you are buying food, you are buying vehicles, you are buying real estate, you are buying any sort of furnitures or whatever things it may be. All of that goes into personal consumption expenditure. Business investment is nothing but businesses spending money because they need to purchase their machinery, they need to create some sort of human resource so that they can invest that human resource into creating some products, right? So all of that will go into business investment. Government spends money. So when government spends money, what happens is that government may take debt also, right? uh, because government has an income based on the taxation that it has, and it has got some productive resources. For example, in India, you have got ONGC, who produces oil, and they get the money, they give the money to the government, right? They give a lot of royalties to the government. So government has income from that sources, government has income from taxes, but government will also have to spend a lot of money because it will have to spend, let's say, on its salaries, on maintaining the roads, on maintaining the government services, and many other things, right? So government has many. So those all goes into government spending, and that becomes the part of the GDP. But again, government may need to take debt because you are spending, but uh, government, government debt always keeps increasing. That the reason is that government is a entity which will stay till eternity, right? We will not stay till eternity. We have a limited lifetime, but government has an infinite lifetime, so it can keep increasing its debt. It doesn't have to completely pay back its debt, right? So that is why government increases its debt as a part of something called as fiscal policy. Whenever government does the spending, that is kind of called a fiscal policy in the GDP, right?
Okay.
So why do we call it fiscal policy? Fiscal is just the term. So it's the government. Fiscal is related to the government. That's why we call it fiscal policy. But as a part of fiscal policy, government may take more amount of debt, and it may actually increase spending into certain areas. It may increase spending into social services, or it may increase spending into some sort of productive assets like education, ports, roads, or those kind of things.
Okay.
Or it can decrease the spending also. At certain point of time, the government may be inclined to decrease spending. When the economy is doing too well, it does not require too much of stimulus, then the government may reduce its spending also. So that is a part of fiscal policy. Now, when you are thinking about GDP, you also have to think about the components of GDP. And then there is one small concept, which is like spending, the kind of spending that we do. Let's say I give you 1,000 rupees. You go and spend that 1,000 rupees and give it to somebody else. That person also goes and spends that 1,000 rupees and gives it to somebody else, basically. So one unit of 1,000 rupees basically circulated 3 times. This is nothing but the velocity of money. This is simply velocity. So let's say in 1 year, 1,000 rupees got spent 3 times. So velocity is kind of 3 for that unit of money.
Okay.
Right. So these are some of the concepts of GDP. But again, when the GDP is, let's say, growing, it is substantially growing. There can be side effects of GDP growing too fast. The first side effect that I can think of, maybe you can say that what is the side effect you can think of when a GDP grows too fast?
Yeah, it's inflation, I think. So, it's growing too fast, prices will also increase, and every year, whatever, inflation is the primary effect, right, of GDP growing
Yes.
too fast.
Yeah, right. So if the GDP is growing too fast, there may be people may be spending too much money, and a lot of money may be getting circulated. Because of that, there may be too much of demand for goods and services, and the supply may be limited. Because of that, there can be price rise. I mean, the price can rise at a faster pace compared to what is normally happening. So a side effect is kind of inflation. So to tame inflation, to ensure that inflation remains within bounds, there is a central authority, right? That is basically called as central bank. So there is another authority uh, in understanding GDP or in understanding the basic macroeconomics. That is the monetary policy. So one policy I already spoke about, which is the government's stimulus or government reducing spending, which is fiscal policy. The other is called as monetary policy. Now, the monetary policy is run by the central bank. Okay. Now, what is a central bank? Central bank does not mean that in India you have a central bank of India. That is not central bank. So that is just the name of that bank. But for every country, there is a designated authority. Let me again share my screen. I will give you some examples. So central bank is kind of an independent banking authority which will conduct the monetary policy. It will regulate the banks. It will control the money supply also, which basically means that it can print its money and supply it to the other people. Like normally how it happens is that central bank will purchase government bonds. Government will issue bonds that will be purchased by individuals and banks and other institutions. And central bank will go and purchase those bonds from them when it wants to create money. When it wants to create an additional amount of money, it will just go and print that money and purchase certain assets with that money. And when it wants to decrease, let's say, the money supply that is there in the economy, this money supply, which is created by the central bank, is called as base money supply. It is simply base money supply. So if you look at the monetary base, if you look at this equation, right, monetary base equal to currency in circulation plus bank reserve, it basically means that this is the base money that has been created by the central bank, right? So this is monetary base. Now, a central bank is responsible for creating the monetary base, right? Let's say the monetary base is $1 trillion at this time, hypothetically. That can increase when it basically wants to stimulate the economy. It will go and purchase more amount of government bonds or certain other securities. Or if it wants to decrease the monetary base because the economy is already doing too well and the inflation is high, at that time it will go and sell certain amount of these securities. Okay. That is how we will, central bank will regulate the market. That is one way. The second way is reducing and increasing the interest rate. Now, there is something called as 0-day interest rate or 1-day interest rate, right? Which is like the overnight interest rate. Let's say I borrow money from you and I pay you certain interest rate. right? For the overnight lending. Let's say today I borrow money from you, borrow 100 rupees, and tomorrow I will pay you certain amount, which is let's say 100.1, right? So whatever is the implied interest rate will become the overnight interest rate. So this overnight interest rate is influenced by the central bank because they have something called, let's say, repo rate and reverse repo rate, and based on that they try to regulate the interest rate in the market. So if they basically increase the short-term interest rate, the long-term interest rate is supposed to increase. Always it does not happen, but it is supposed to increase. So that is generally how the central bank will try to control the money supply as well as the interest rate in the market.
Okay. 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 So yeah, I think this was helpful. And so what we can do is maybe have a part two of this discussion, and then we can have a part two of we can continue the discussion in part two of another. So basically, second video. I think that should be fine, right? I think that would be better because there are a lot of
Yes,
topics to be covered, and then macroeconomics is itself a big one. So I think let's
yes,
continue in the second part. Yeah.
sure, Kalyan. That will make
Yeah, yeah.
sense.
Nice having you, Pratik. I mean, it was very helpful. So we'll have a second video and then we can continue the session. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Kalyan.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Pratik. Bye.